Chapter 2. Give regards to Clark, Poindexter. Larry Dunn was the king of kindergarten to the 4th grade, where I went to school at Clark Elementary. He was the king because he was a lot older than anyone else and twice as strong as the rest of us. He was stronger because he was almost full grown. He had flunked some grades 2 or 3 times. He was the 3rd oldest kid at Clark. The only ones older than him and stronger than him were Byron and Buphead, who were in the 6th grade, and who'd also flunked some grade at least once. We weren't sure because it was something that Mama and Dad did not talk about. Larry Dunn was the king of the kindergarten to 4th grade only because Byron didn't care about them. Larry was the king of Clark, but Byron, he was a god. It seemed like that could make me a prince or a real strong angel or something, but it didn't work that way. I was just another 4th grade punk. I guess having the school's god as my big brother did give me some kind of special rights, but not a whole bunch. It helped me with stupid stuff, like the time I found $1 and got too excited and crazy enough to show Larry Dunn. I knew this was a big mistake the second before he stuck out his hand and said, "Let me see it." What could I do? "Kenny," he said, "where'd you find this buck?" "Outside the school at Kenilworth." Larry turned over my dollar over and over. I started to get nervous. "You know what, Kenny?" "What?" I held my breath. "This is some kind of real strange stuff. I lost 50 cents over at Kenilworth yesterday, and I bet my 50 cents hooked up with somebody else's 50 cents, and it may hit this here book." Whew. I let my breath go and smiled and nodded. So we went up to the store and got change, and Larry Dunn got back the 50 cents he lost, and I kept the other 50 that got hooked up with Larry's. I knew if it wasn't for Byron being my big brother, Larry would have said something like, "Since my 50 cents found this other 50 cents and they hooked up to make it this here buck, I'm going to keep the whole thing. You know, rules, finders, keepers, losers, weepers." Having the school's god as my relative helped in some other ways, too. I had 2 things wrong with me that would have gotten me beat up and teased a lot more than I did if it hadn't been for Bi. The first thing was because I loved to read, and people thought I was real smart, teachers especially. Teachers started treating me different than all the other kids. When I was in 1st grade, at first I thought it was cool for them to think I was smart, but then I found out it made me enemies with some of the other kids. Back when I was in 2nd grade, Miss Henry used to take me to different classrooms and have me read stuff like the Bible or the newspaper in front of other kids. This was a lot of fun until I started looking up from when I was reading, and I noticed Miss Henry and the other teachers were smiling a mile a minute, but the kids had their faces twisted up or were looking at me like I was a 6-legged dog. 2 years later, Miss Henry sent me to Mr. Allum's class, 5th grade class. Mr. Allum's was the toughest teacher in the whole school, and just being in front of him was kind of scary. He looked down at me and said, "Good morning, Mr. Watson. I hope you're in good form today." I just nodded at him because I wasn't sure what that meant. "Don't be nervous, Kenny," Miss Henry said. "Mr. Allums would like you to read a few passages from Langston Hughes." She handed me the book and said, "You wait here while we introduce you to the class." Man, some of the time I wish I was as smart as the teachers thought I was, because if I had been, I would have dropped that book and I would have ran all the way home. If I had been smart enough to figure out that way that what was going to happen next, that I would not have gone into that room. I stood in the hall looking at stuff they wanted me to read, and Mr. Allums told his class, "All right, I have a special treat for you today. I often told you that as Negroes, the world is at many times a hostile place for us." I saw Mr. Allums walking back and forth, whacking a yardstick in his hand. "I have pointed out time and time again how vital it is that one is be able to read well. I've stressed on numerous occasions the importance of being familiar and comfortable with literature. Today, Miss Henry and I would like to give you a demonstration of your own possibilities in this regard. I want you to carefully note how advanced this 2nd grader student is, and I particularly want you to be aware of the effect his skills have upon you. I want you to be aware that some of our kids read at miraculous levels. I saw Mr. Adams point the yardstick at someone, somewhere in the class, and say, "Perhaps you'd like to finish the introduction. I think you know our guest quite well." Whoever he pointed to said, "What? I didn't do nothing." Miss Henry waved me into the room to come in and stand in front of the class. I guess I was too nervous about Mr. Adams to recognize the voice, but as soon as I walked into the room, I froze. There, in the 2 seats, closest to the teacher's desk, in the first row, I saw Bumphead and Byron. The Langston Hughes books jumped right out of my hand, and the whole class laughed. Everyone but Byron. His eyes locked on mine, and I felt everything starting to melt inside me. Mr. Adams slammed the yardstick on his desk and the class got real quiet real fast. Let's see if you can find this so humorous after you've heard how well this young man reads. And Byron Watson, if you are incapable of taking some of the fire out of your eyes, I assure you I will find a way to assist you. If instead of trying to intimidate your young brother, you would emulate him and use the mind of yours, perhaps you'd find things much easier. Perhaps you wouldn't be making another appearance in 5th grade next year. Now, would you? Byron got one more dirty look in, and then he looked down at his desk. Mr. Adams might have tied me up to a pole and said, "Ready, aim, fire." So I read through the Langston Hughes stuff real quick, but that was a mistake, because Miss Henry said, slow down, Kenneth." And then she took my book from my hand and turned it back upside down. She had a great big smile when she told Mr. Adams, "When he goes too fast, this shows him to slow down a bit." So I had more with the book upside down and got some real strange looks from all the 5th graders. Finally, they let me quit, and Mr. Adams stood and clapped his hands. And a couple of the other kids did too. Byron never looked at me the whole time, but Bumphead was giving me enough dirty looks for both of them. "Bravo! Outstanding, Mr. Watson. Your future is unlimited. Bravo!" All I could do was try to figure out how to get home alive. I didn't even get out of the schoolyard before Byron and Bumphead caught up to me, and a little crowd bunched up around us, and everyone was real excited because they knew I was about to get jacked up. Bumphead said, "Here, that little egghead punk." "Leave the little clown alone," Byron said. "It is a crying shame taking him down around like a circus freak." He punched me in a soft way on my arm and said, "At least you ought to make 'em pay you for doing that mess. If it was me, they'd be coming out with their pockets with some folded money every time they took me around." I couldn't believe it. I think Byron was actually proud of me. When everybody saw Byron wasn't going to do anything to me, they began being smart. They all decided that they better not do anything either. I still got Egghead or Poindexter or Professor from some of the time, but that wasn't bad compared to what could have happened. The other thing that people would have teased me about a lot more if it hadn't been for Byron was my eye. Mama said it wasn't important and that I was a real handsome little boy, but ever since I'd been born, one of my eyeballs had been kind of lazy. That means instead of looking where I want it to look, it always rests in the corner of my eye by my nose. I'd done lots of things to make it better, but none of them worked. I'd done exercises where I had to look that way, then this way, then that way, then up, then down, then up. But when I look in the mirror, my eyeball was still in the corner. I wore a patch on my other eye to keep making my lazy one work, but that didn't work either. It was fun to play like I was a pirate, though, for a while, but that also got boring. Finally, Byron gave me some good advice. He noticed that when I talked to people, I squinted my lazy eye kind of shut, or I put my hand on my face to cover my eye. I only did this because it was hard to talk to someone when they were staring at your eye instead of listening to what you had to say. "Look, man," he told me, "if you don't want people to look at your messed up eye, you just got to do this." Byron made me stand still and look straight ahead, and then he stood at my side and told me to look at him. So I turned my head to look. He said, "Nah, man, keep your head straight. Look at me sideways." I did. "See? You ain't cockeyed no more. Your eyes are straight as an arrow now." I went to the bathroom and stood on the toilet and leaned over and looked in the mirror sideways, and Byron was right. I couldn't help smiling. Mama was right, too. I am kind of handsome little guy when I looked at myself sideways with both eyes pointing in the same direction. Even though my older brother, Clark, was Clark Elementary School's god, that didn't mean I never got teased or beat up. I still had to fight a lot, and I still got called Cockeye Kenny, and I still had people stare at my eye. And I still had to watch when they made their eyes go crossed when they were teasing me. It seems like one of these things happened to me every single day. But if it hadn't been for Byron, I knew that they would have happened a whole lot more. That's why I'm really kind of nervous. What's going to happen if Byron ever gets out of 6th grade and he went to junior high? Because before I caught up to him, that's why I was going to send off for that book, Learn Karate in 3 weeks. That was in the back of my comic book. The worst part of being teased was riding the bus on the mornings when Byron and Bubhead decided to skip school. We'd be standing in the corner waiting for the bus, Byron and Bubhead and all the other school old thugs in one bunch. Larry Dunn, Banky, and all the other young thugs in the other bunch. All the regular kids like Joetta in the third bunch, and then me off to the side by myself. When we saw the bus come around the block, 3 blocks away, we all got in a line. Old thugs, young thugs, regular kids, and me. I knew whether By or Bumphead were going. I hated it when By walked past me and said, "Give my regards to Clark, Poindexter." Some of the times the words were a signal for other kids to jump on me. But the day I stopped hating the bus so much began with those same words. We were all lined up. "Give my regards to Clark, Poindexter," By said, and disappeared around the back. I got on the bus and took my seat right behind the bus driver. The days By rode, I would sit a few rows from the back. On other days, I would sit right by the driver because it was the most protection. The bus drove down the public housing. After everyone was picked up, we headed towards Clark. But today, the bus driver did something he'd never done before. He noticed that 2 kids were running up late, and he stopped and let them get on. Every other time that people were late, he'd just laugh and tell them, "This is the only way you little punks are going to learn to be punctual. I hope that fool had a pleasant walk to school." Then no matter how hard the kid banged down the side of the bus, the driver would just laugh and take off, laughing out the window. That was part of my one miracle that let me know that something special was going to happen. As soon as the doors of that bus swung open and 2 strange new boys got on, part of my miracle happened. Once in a while, Mama would make me go to Sunday school with Joey. Even though I thought it was just listening to Mrs. Davidson, I had learned one thing. I could come to you when you were feeling bad, real bad, and that you could take all your problems away and you could make you feel better. I learned that there was a person who saved you. Your personal savior was sent by God and to protect you and to help you out. But when the bigger one of the boys got on the bus late, said to the bus driver in a real southern accent, "Thank you for stopping, sir." I knew right away. I knew that God had finally gotten sick of me being teased and picked on all the time. As I looked up at the new boy with a great big smile and the jacket with holes in the sleeves and the raggedy tennis shoes and the torn up blue jeans, I knew who he was. Maybe he didn't live a million years ago. Maybe he didn't have a beard and long hair, and maybe he wasn't born under a star. But I knew anyways. I knew God had finally sent me some help. I knew God had finally sent me my personal savior. As soon as the boy thanked the bus driver that real polite country way, I jerked around in my seat to see what all the other kids were going to do to them. Whenever someone started new at Clark, most of the kids It took some time to see what it was like. The boys would see if they were tough or weak, if he was cool or square. The girls would look to see if he was cute or ugly. Then they decided how to treat them. I knew that there was not going to be any waste of time with this new guy. It was to be real easy and real quick with him. He was like nobody we'd ever seen before. He was raggedy, he was country, he was skinny, and he was smiling at everybody a mile a minute. And the boy with him had to be his little brother because he looked like a shrunk up version of the big one. Everyone had stopped what they were doing, and they were real quiet. Some of them were standing to get a better look, and the older one got an even bigger smile on his face and waved real hard at everybody. And the little shrunk up version of him smiled and did the same thing. Then they said, "Hi, y'all!" And I knew that we were here with someone who was going to be easier for the kids to pick on than me. Most of the kids were just staring. Then Larry Dunn said, "Lord, today, look at that nappy-headed, down-home country cornflake of a cat drug in from Mississippi, y'all." About 1,000,000 fingers pointed at the new kids, and 1,000,000 laughs almost knocked them over. Larry Dunn threw the apple core from the back of the bus to the new kid. He got his hand up just in time to block it from hitting his face. Little bits of apple exploded all over the kid, his brother, and me. The other kids started wild laughing and saying to each other, "Hi, y'all!" The bus driver jumped out of his seat, stood between the new kid and Larry Dunn. You see how these kids is? This boy shows you some manners and some respect, and y'all want to attack him. That's why none of y'all's ever going to be nothing." The bus driver was really mad. "Larry Dunn, you better sit your butt down and cut this mess out. I know you don't want to start panning on folks, do you?" "Not with what I know about your mama." Someone said, "Ooh," and Larry sat down. The bus got real quiet. We'd never seen the bus driver get this way before. He pushed the two kids in the same seat next to me and told them, "Don't you pay no mind to them little fools. They ain't happy lest they're dragging someone down." Then he added, "Y'all just sit next to Poindexter here. He don't bother no one." I sat there and looked at them sideways. I didn't say anything to them, and they didn't say anything to me, but I was kind of surprised that God would send a savior to me in such raggedy clothes.